Hi, I'm Bomber. I'm on the Baja forum site, mainly bajaforum.co.uk, and what I'd like to show you is my power control slipper clutch mod. This is my power control slipper clutch, and it's fitted to my car with the mod on it, and I'm just going to show you the mod here. And this is basically the mod. I'm zooming in a bit so you can see it a bit better. There we go. This is the power control slipper clutch, and the mod itself is this bit inside here. Basically it's shimmed, the back of the slipper clutch here, the back of the clutch basket is shimmed directly onto the outside of the bearing, and then there's some shims down here and a washer, and what this makes here is a spur gear holder, so you can use any spur gear on there that you want to use, and it will run through your power control slipper clutch, and it can be metal, plastic, or the laminate type, and you can have them up to any. I've had it down to 54 gearing, so you can have 55, 56 and 57, but I'm sure if there was a 53 tooth too or a 52 tooth it would work as well. What I'd like to show you is just a video on and talk about how I came about the mod, how to do the mod if you want to do it yourself, and the benefits I found of using this mod like it is now. So here we go. You just have to bear with me a second because I don't have anybody to hold my camera, and it's got to all sort of fit in this holder that I've made. So here we go. So basically this is my power control slipper clutch mod. When I first started using my car, when I first started using it, I started going through plastic spur gears really quickly, and I got fed up with it. So I went to this. This is a 57 tooth all steel spur gear. It's made by Robinson Racing. But the problem is, when I started speaking to racers and other people in the industry, they told me that I should be using a plastic spur gear. The reason why you use a plastic spur gear is because it's a weak point in transmission, and the plastic spur gear protects all of your transmission. Now the only other option I had, if I was going to still use a metal spur gear and to have a weak point in the transmission itself, was to use the power control slipper clutch. Now the problem I had with the power control slipper clutch is it only comes with, at the moment it only comes with this spur gear, and it's a 57 tooth, which is fine if you want to use 57 tooth gearing, but it's no good for me because I've upgraded now and I've got more powerful engine and I use higher gearing. So what I needed to do was, at the time when I first started this mod, I was using this. This is the 55 tooth gearing. I now use 54 because I've got even a more powerful engine, but this is 55 tooth gearing, and this is again a Robinson Racing. It's an aluminium centre with the stainless, with the steel outside. Okay, and what I did was, with the first modification I did, or I thought I'd do on the spur gear itself, was make it just like the make it just like the HPI spur gear. So the first thing I did was tap on the Robinson Racing spur gears. What you have is these 4 holes, and what I did was I just basically, because it's aluminium, it's really easy to work with, I tapped some threads into the 4 holes, and then I countersunk the 4 holes, and then what I did was I put a bearing into the spur gear itself, and then I put the 4 bolts in, and they would press onto the bearing, and that way it was exactly the same setup but just a different gearing. This is 55 gearing, but it was exactly the same setup as the HPI 57 tooth gearing. The problem is it didn't work. Now the reason why it didn't work is because this is perfect. There's a lot of research and development gone into this, and the bearing is perfectly in line with the spur gear. What happened with this is it's not. This isn't perfect, and it's not in line with the spur gear. Now there is a possibility that when I tightened up the 4 bolts, I could have pulled the bearing slightly out of alignment. Well, what happened was, when I put the spur gear onto the layshaft and then added the rest of the slipper clutch, when I tightened it down, when I was turning it, it was wobbling like that because the bearing was out of alignment, and this was causing alignment problems with the pinion gear here to such an extent that the spur gear wouldn't turn. So that option was out of the window really, and I needed to come up with something else. When you get the HPI spur gear and you get the HPI slipper clutch, and it all comes together as a one, you get some washers. You get a washer that fits in the back of the spur gear itself, and then you use your normal purple washer there, and that is what you push onto your lay shaft. Okay, that's how that works. And what happens is, let's get that out. What happens is on this, I'm going to simulate that by pushing my finger through the spur gear itself. So that's it pushed onto the lay shaft. Now what happens now is, the rest of this, which is your clutch basket and all of your plates, is then pushed onto your spur gear. It gets pushed onto your spur gear. It gets pushed onto your spur gear by this big spring. There's a big spring in here and a lot of tension in that, and you take the tension up with this nut, and that forces this onto here. So what's happening is the HPI slipper clutch, the power control slipper clutch, is pushing onto the spur gear itself, and the spur gear is pushing onto the outside of the bearing via these 4 bolts. We already know that, but the problem is I can't do that with my other spur gear, so that mod was out of the question. So what I thought about doing, and what I looked at, was just remove the 4 bolts, and instead of the 4 bolts pressing onto the outside of the bearing, and what I thought I'd do is put a washer on there. I'd remove the 4 bolts, and basically the clutch basket puts direct pressure onto the outside of the bearing through a washer, instead of pressing onto the spur gear and then the spur gear pressing onto the outside of the bearing through these 4 bolts. So basically there was no pressure anymore on the spur gear, and the spur gear wasn't an integral part of the clutch system. And I'll show you how this actually works, because it's a lot easier if you see it. And what I'm going to do is just going to undo my spur gear, undo my slipper clutch. Okay, take the bolt off, take the spring off. I'm going to keep all these together. These are all my clutch plates and the clutch basket. And you'll notice, to do this mod, you have to grind down this has to be flush. Okay, now I've asked this raised bit, when you actually look at it, it looks like it touches the centre of the bearing. Okay, it looks like it actually touches the centre of the bearing, this part here. It looks like it touches that. Well, it can't. It physically cannot touch the outside of the bearing. Now the reason for that is because the way bearings work is, you have one bit on the inside and then everything else spins around the outside, and that includes the clutch basket. If the clutch basket was touching the inside bearing, when this spun round, all it would do is grind itself down. So it's not actually touching it, and I've asked HPI what is the reasons for that being raised, and they haven't written back to me, which I'm kind of annoyed with, but there you go. But anyway, so all you need to do, your first bit, is to put this on a lathe and just grind that down. Okay, so it's flat, and that's the best way to do it. Okay, so you grind that raised bit down. If you look on here, there's my bearing, and there's my washer. My space off. So, put my bearing inside my spur gear. Let's use it on a plastic one. Here's my 54-2 spur gear. Put my bearing onto my spur gear, like that, and there's my washer, and then my washer then presses on top of my bearing. Now the washer itself is just slightly higher than the spur gear, and that's how you want it. This is a normal M12 washer that I've got. They come in different sizes, and then all I did was I filed down the inside of the washer so it doesn't touch the inside of the bearing. Now what happens now is, when you put your slipper clutch into your spur gear, what happens is this bearing now works. Okay, it's not been you've got the inside and the outside. The pressure now from the clutch case is now onto the outside of the bearing. So that's that. The problem you have though is this can happen. Okay, it comes apart. So how do you get around that? Well, it's really easy, and I'm going to show you how. Right, the first thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to put this together properly. Alright, so put my push drives in. There's my push drives in. Put my bearing in. Okay, there we go. Then I've got my washer. Let's put my washer on the top of there. Right, so that's all that ready to go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on my power control slipper clutch. Okay, and just push that all home. There we go, that's all in one now. Now the problem I need to do now is stop this from lifting off, and this is what the mod is. And all I've used is some shims. These are your normal shims that you use for doing your wheels. Okay, you can get them from anywhere. And all I did was shim them out until it was flush. Push this together until it was flush with the top of the shims are flush with the top of the spur gear. And then all I did was add one extra shim. That's how it works. Okay. There. Anyway, yeah, I've got one extra shim, so that's how it works. Then on the back of that, on the top of all of that, I've used an M12 penny washer. Now a penny washer is you have a flat machine surface and you have a round surface. This is the top bit there is the round surface, and it's a round surface that you need to put up against your spur gear. Okay, now actually on the where the penny washer goes on here, what you need to do is shim this out. So this is the flat side of the penny washer, and you need to shim it out again using the same shims against the back, and you want it so it's just off the gear plate. I'll show you so you can have a look. Here you go. There you go. So there's my penny washer, and you see if I give it a little wiggle there, you can see that it's actually not touching the gear plate. Alright, now what we need to do is put the whole thing together. Okay, now here's all my shims, so I'm going to put all my shims on there. Okay, there's all my shims. Here's my slipper clutch with my spur gear on there, with my bearing and my washer inside. I'll just push that on there. It's all on there. Now all I need to do is put my spring on and then tighten my nut up. My locking nut. Okay, I'm not going to tighten it all the way because we're going to take it apart very shortly. And there you go. That's it. Now have a quick look at it from the top. And there's the mod itself. Okay, now if you look at it, there is a slight movement in the spur gear itself, and that's how you want it. Alright, the spur gear itself is just floating basically, it's just in the spur gear holder, and you want it nice and loose. What that does is stops any friction between the spur gear itself and the penny washer, and this you need to do that on the metal ones as well. Now I'll just put the metal one on so you can see that as well with that. See how easy it is to swap across from one to the other. There we go. So what we do is we'll just undo it again. There's my nut. Take my spring off. Take the whole so they don't come off my washers. So there's my spur gear. All I'm going to do is separate them. Okay, like that. And then what I'm going to do is grab my aluminium or my metal steel spur gear. Okay, put my cush drives in. There you go. Oh, I'm getting there. Put your cush drives. There's your bearing. Pop your bearing in, and there's your washer. Okay, and again that washer, you can see it's just slightly higher than the spur gear itself. And that means is when the slipper clutch is pressing onto it, it's pressing onto the washer and not the spur gear. So push them two together. Okay, press those two together. Right, now all I need to do is push this onto the car. There we go. There we go, and that's the mod. And again, have a look at it from the top. There we go, and you can see there's a nice bit of movement. There's about 2 or 3 millimeters of movement in that, and that's what we want. If you do that, it doesn't matter if you use aluminium or steel, you won't get any friction problems between the gear and the back. And the reason for that is, your spur gear is actually trying to stay upright. It's not trying to turn or twist, it's trying to stay upright. Now I'll prove this to you now. Here's your pinion gear, and I'm going to put the pinion gear and I'm going to turn it like that, and what you should see is the spur gear start to turn as well. So put it in there and turn it. Okay, now your pinion gear is at that angle, so your spur gear is wanting to stay upright. So that bearing at the washer at the back is just a guide, and all it there is to guide the it's part of basically the spur gear holder, the setup, and that's how it works. As long as you've got it loose like that, there won't be any problems with it at all, even if you've got a metal one. The other thing is, if with the when you're putting the washer on there, as long as you put the washer, the rounded face facing the back of the spur gear, you won't have any problems at all. If you do it the other way and put the flat surface against the back of the spur gear, then you can cause problems. I'll show you that now. There we go. Here's a diagram I drew earlier. That should come into focus. There we go. So here's our spur gear. Alright. There's our slipper clutch on this side, and there's our brakes on this side, and then what we've got here is our washer, and you can see we've got the round surface facing the spur gear. Now when the spur gear moves, you've got the round surface, there's no rubbing whatsoever on this spur gear. Now if we change it so it's like that, and then what happens is, if you put the flat surface facing the spur gear, you end up getting this edge, then damages the spur gear. Alright, so as long as you put it round that way, as long as you've got it round facing outwards, and you've got it loose enough so it's like that, alright, you won't have any problems at all, and that's whether it be metal or plastic. Okay, now I'm actually running plastic spur gears now. I've been converted back to plastic spur gears. Now the reason for this is because when I originally did this mod, I was practicing engineering it using plastic spur gears. And the thing is, because they were easier to work with, one of the other things you have to do with your spur gear, which is a lot harder with the metal gear, is you need to make that's your normal hole in your spur gear, okay, and you obviously need to enlarge that to fit your shims through, the normal shims that you use on your hubs. So you need to scrape that. You need to make that hole. Well, these are really easy to work with because this is quite hard plastic, and all you do is get a pair of scissors and just round it up and make it bigger like that. The thing was, why I've gone back to plastic and now and instead of staying with metal is because one of the really interesting thing that I found when I was trialing the slipper club was that my spur gears now seem to be lasting forever compared to before. And this is a 55 tooth IRP laminated spur gear. It's a really good product. I'm not slating it. It is a really good product, but this is what I did to this after 2 tanks of fuel. This actually rounded off like this about 3 minutes onto my 3rd tank of fuel. Just to give you another example, this is a 55 tooth sprocket. This has been on for half a tank of fuel. Let me have a look. Where is it? Yeah, this was on for half a tank of fuel. I don't know if you can see there, possibly all the teeth on there all mashed down, and all the teeth around the edges, they're all white where the plastic's been stressed. Just have a look at this spur gear that I had on the car earlier. Bearing in mind that this is what I used to do, or what I used to do when I was testing it after 2 tanks of fuel. This spur gear has been on for 12 tanks of fuel. Okay, and this is a 55 tooth hostile spur gear, and if you look at it, and this is after 12 tanks of fuel, but this has been used through the HPI slipper clutch. There's hardly any wear on it whatsoever. There is slight wear on the teeth, just normal wear, but there is no stress on it, and there's no white bits on any of the teeth, which is remarkable. Now At the moment I'm now using 54 tooth gearing because the engine I've got is an OBR engine, and it's got an modified ECU, so it's incredibly powerful. And the plastic spur gear that's on there at the moment is a 54 tooth spur gear. This is the 54 tooth spur gear, and again, if I show you that, if I can get a close-up of that, you can see there's no wear on it whatsoever. And again, that is with the most powerful engine I've ever owned, and that is after 8 tanks of fuel. So I've gone from completely destroying spur gear after 2 tanks of fuel on an engine that isn't half as powerful as the one I've got now, to now having a plastic spur gear that is not even wearing after 8 tanks of fuel. So the mod itself, you know, has a lot of benefits. So, you know, it also has you can also use metal spur gear with it, well, so you have no wear with it whatsoever. Now, there are a couple of things you need to think about. And the first thing is, how tight do you do this bolt up with this mod? And I'll show you how I work that out. So I'm going to undo it again. So what I'm going to do is take the whole lot off again. I'm going to take the spur gear apart from the slipper clutch. I'm going to take the cush drives off. Okay. The first thing we need to look at is how tight. The first thing we need to look at is how tight we have to do this bolt up, which is important. Now, the reason why it's important is because that affects how much tension is on the spring, and that affects how much friction is that we have between the clutch plates, which in turn will govern how much your clutch slips. Okay, so we don't want to get that wrong. This is the spacers that HPI give you with the kit, and the kit's been worked out by them, and it works. So what we need to do, this is our measurement, this is our base measurement. So the first thing we need to do is work out how many shims we have on here and the washer. So the first thing I'm going to do is take these off and pile them all up together. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so there's the top shims. I'll take the bottom shims off using a screwdriver, just to help me get them off. And there we go. There we go. And basically, all I've done is I've piled up all those shims and the washer there. Now all I need to do is now measure them up against the issue washer from HPI and the my shims and washer, and you can see they're actually about the same. So I really didn't have that much to worry about there. If anything, I'm about 1 shim thicker on one of my shims thicker than this. So I've got 1 more shim on that. Now how I get round that is, all I do is back off the nut on here 1/4 of a turn. Now in the HPI instructions it says you do the nut up all the way, and then you back it off 1 turn. So when I do my mod up, I now undo it 1 1/4 turns. And that's how I get round that. But we also have another thing to think about, and that's the washer. Inside the HPI spur gear, the HPI slipper clutch fits all the way into it. Now it doesn't fit all the way into it in my mod because we have the bearing in there, and what we've done is we've then stuck the washer on top. So it doesn't fit on resting against the spur gear itself. You've got a slightly raised bit here because of the washer. So we need to take an account for that. And how I do that is I do another 1/4 of a turn. Okay, so instead of me doing this all the way up as per the HPI instructions, what I would do is I would do that up and all the way in, and then instead of undoing it 1 turn, I will undo it 1 1/2 turns, and that works, and the system works. Okay, I'll just show you the actual clutch working with my mod. You actually see it working. I'm going to put the bearing on, and effectively it's the same setup without the spur gear, because the spur gear isn't an integral part. The spur gear is just the bridging the gap between the pinion gear and the clutch basket. That's all it's doing. Now what I'm going to do is do that nice and loose. I don't want that tight. Now basically with this mod, what happens is, there's your pinion gear spinning around. That is driving whatever spur gear you've got in there. It can be metal, plastic, any gearing you want. That is turning your clutch basket. Okay, what happens is you're charging across the field, you're flat out, and your car leaves the ground and then hits the ground again. You've got all that power now on this this pinion gear, pinion gear driving your clutch basket round. Now what happens is, with the clutch, if you've got it running through the HPI slipper clutch, is it will slip like that. Okay, so there we have it. Your wheel's spinning again, your wheel hits the ground, all that force gets transmitted to the slipper clutch, and it momentarily slips. And it is just a momentarily actually slips really quick, and you hear it like it's like a popping sound, pop pop pop. So that's the only time you'll really know that it's working, is when you start to hear that popping sound. And the other thing is, you'll know it's working if you're like me and you destroy plastic spur gears and you're running on a plastic spur gear. You'll find that your plastic spur gears just seem to last forever now. I've actually been using only 2 plastic spur gears on this car since I've been doing this mod. One's a 54 tooth and one's a 55 tooth, and so far in 4 mods I haven't gone through a plastic spur gear yet, which is pretty good going, considering I used to go out on a weekend and I'd go through half a dozen spur gears in a day. So there you go. So for me, it's just a really good win situation, if you like. To put into context, I paid £100 for this power control slipper clutch, and it's paid for itself in spur gears in less than 4 months in the use I have of the car. So it's a really good mod, and plus it protects all of your transmission and everything else. So there you go. Any questions on it, drop me a line, and happy days. Okay, just thought I'd add a few things to the power control slipper clutch. Apart from obviously not having the it shimmed too tight at the back, and having the stainless steel washer in the right way, and basically what you have is you have a flat surface and the round surface, and it's a round surface that you want to be touching the back of the spur gear itself. And if you look, there's like a line on this sort of around the centre of this washer, because this washer's been used, and it's just like a polished line, and that's what you also get on the back of your spur gear. It's just a polish on the just a polished line. You won't see anything on plastic, but if you've got metal, you'll just end up with a polished line. As long as you don't shim it too tight, it'll be fine. And this washer though is stainless steel, and if you can get stainless steel, then that's the best thing to have, I think, because stainless steel doesn't corrode. And what you don't get on the face of this here is pitting due to corrosion, because that would just cause extra friction. And all it'll do is the metals, the spur gear, if you've got a metal one on there, and the stainless steel penny washer here, they'll just polish themselves. You won't get any rubbing, they'll just polish themselves. So if you can get a stainless steel one, then get a stainless steel one. The other thing is this nut that goes on here. Alright, the HPI one, the actual HPI nut, lock nut, isn't really very good. So there's 2 types that I use. Okay, this is the first one. It's just a bigger nylock nut. It's a better made one. The only problem with nylock though, there is heat due to because it's next to the engine. Not a lot of heat, but there could be heat on here, and the layshaft is connected to your brakes and stuff, so heat transfer after a couple of hours could heat this up. So you can get a better nylock nut, or what you can do is use what I use, and that's this type. Okay, it's a bit hard to see really. It's this type of nut. If you can see that, and it's all metal. It's all metal with like a spring top, and there's a thread all the way through it. This nut's a lot better, and what I found is that the HPI nut, after a few weeks, start to back itself out, and basically all it does is come loose, and you lose drive because you don't get enough friction in the clutch plates. So you just start losing drive, and your clutch starts slipping all the time. It doesn't cause any damage, and it's because the nut comes undone. So swap it out for something like this, and then you won't have any problems. So I can't really think of anything else to go with a mod. So happy days.